Hi, friends, and welcome back to Tree Hugger Podcast. Thank you for being here. Wherever you're tuning in from, I'm honored to be in your ears for a little while. Your presence in this space matters, and it keeps the roots of this podcast nourished and growing. Before we dive into the conversation, I want to take a moment to thank you for supporting the podcast and being part of Tree Hugger Fellowship and this evolving community. If you haven't yet, I invite you to subscribe to Grit and Grove over on Substack, where you can find the podcast archive, where also I share more written reflections, short dispatches from my restoration practice, and deeper conversations about tending life in difficult times. You can always find links to all the important things in the show notes. Today's conversation is one that circles all the way back to the origin of this show, the name Tree Hugger itself. A word that has been playful, sometimes used with affection, sometimes wielded with ridicule, but underneath it, there has always been a profound embodied truth that a hug to a tree is to declare kinship. Not metaphorical kinship, nor poetic kinship, but real belonging. And today, we get to trace that belonging to its source story. The Bishnoi people of northern India, who in 1730 literally wrapped their arms around the sacred khejri trees, offering their lives so that these beings could live. 363 villagers gave their heads in a massacre, not out of politics or strategy, but out of love, out of devotion that is woven into the soil of their lives, their families, and their futures. Through the Bishnoi story, we learn about love as an action balanced by stillness and reverence for what most people don't see. Love as an ecological system where human and more than human beings are interdependent and inseparable. We are joined by Martin Goodman, our guide for this story, author of My Head for a Tree, the extraordinary story of the Bishnoi, guardians of nature. Martin is a storyteller in the oldest sense of the word, someone who listens deeply, walks the land, and brings forth the stories that need to be told. His past work has traversed eco-law, scientific biography, fiction, and poetry. In this book, he has offered us a rare gift, a window into a way of being with the world that is not based on dominance or extraction. In this book, he has offered us a rare gift, a window into a way of being with the world that is not based on dominance or extraction, but on a living, breathing ethic of care. His invitation is simple. We cannot become Bishnoi. We should not appropriate their sacred ways, but we can follow their example. We can tend our own circles of kinship with greater courage. So when we tell the story of the Bishnoi, it's easy to frame them as a chapter from long ago, the villagers who once gave their lives for trees. But the Bishnoi are not just a story of the past. They are alive today, carrying forward their principles through droughts, development pressures, and a rapidly changing climate. They run animal rescue shelters, protect endangered blackbuck and chinkara gazelles, and teach their children from the earliest age to recognize and respond to the needs of the more than human around them. They are lawyers, activists, school teachers, and farmers. Many of them are out on the land every day, sheltering orphaned animals, gathering seeds, planting trees, defending sacred groves, not as an act of nostalgia, but as a living commitment to the future. In the midst of modern India's growth and globalization, the Bishnoi remain a rooted, breathing example of what it means to shape an entire society around the ethic of care. Their story is not just history. Their story is happening right now, and we are actively imagining their future. This episode also builds on threads we've been weaving through past and future conversations about love as an ecosystem. You'll hear clear echoes of that here. That love is not simply a romantic sentiment, but a spark plug for stewardship because we notice the relationship between things. That love demands presence, commitment, and sometimes sacrifice. And that love is a system of interrelationships and not possessive. And this is emerging here because for many months I've had Bell Hook's book, All About Love, by my bedside table. She talks specifically through a series of books about the love ethic, the belief that love is an action, a choice to nurture growth, a political stance as much as a personal one. And it also mirrors the spirit of Adrienne Marie Brown's pleasure activism, the understanding that our pleasure and liberation are tied to the well-being of the ecosystems we inhabit. That protecting the places and beings we love is not a grim duty, but a profound source of meaning, joy, and wholeness. Tracking back to my conversation with Martin, we talk about the Bishnoi's 29 principles, which are daily practices that tether them to the living world with tenderness and rigor. We talk about tree hugging not only as a symbol, but a literal ancestral act. We talk about the language of sacrifice and care and what it means to stake your life on the belief that other lives matter. And we reflect on what it would mean to build an ethic of devotion today, not just to trees, but to rivers, grasses, herons, even the invisible beings we harm without noticing. I hope this conversation leaves you not just informed, but deeply stirred. I hope it invites you to ask, what are my roots? What am I willing to protect? How does love show up through my daily choices? What ecosystems of care am I really a part of, and how can I strengthen them? As always, thank you for being part of this journey. Let's now dive into the story of My Head for a Tree, the enduring legacy of the Bishnoi people.
I'm a writer, a novelist, a nonfiction writer, taught at professor level creative writing for a number of years. And I also see myself as being writing about the sacred and using narrative to understand life. An important part of my life is being married to James Thornton, who set up the organization called Client Earth, which is a global organization of lawyers working to save the planet. So environmental lawyers doing the speaking for the earth. And so that's guided a lot of what I do. That's who I am at the moment.
Excellent. Lovely. Thanks for that introduction. I really so grateful for you writing this book. You know, the name of the podcast kind of is an adoption of the story. I think we'll get into that a little bit. But yeah, I've just never found a great guest, I guess, to really tell the story. And I do feel like maybe there isn't a lot of information about this, about these people you've written about either out there. So I feel like you've done it sort of justice to...
One of the prime pieces of information, Michael, is the piece on your own website explaining the origins of the Tree Hugger podcast. It was quite refreshing to find Amrita Devi and the Bishnois and the 363 martyrs mentioned there.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I do, to a certain extent, just didn't really do it justice, just a paragraph about the people. So your book's called My Head for a Tree, and I believe it comes out today. Is that right? Publicly?
It was the 8th of April.
Oh,
so
okay.
Dead recent.
Nice. And then kind of the subtext is the extraordinary story of the Bishnoi, guardians of nature. So I don't know if you can give us some context for the meaning behind My Head for a Tree.
Surely I can. It's a story that comes from 1730. To understand the story, you've got to head to the Thar Desert, which is in northwest of India. The Thar Desert's one of the largest deserts in the world. It's also the most populated desert in the world. It's populated because this community of people, the Bishnoi, have learned how to survive on very little, to live in harmony with nature, and get all that they can, all that sustains them out of their caring for the natural world. To understand the story I'm going to tell you, you need to know something about what a khejri forest is. I expected a forest to be a close assembly of trees. When you get into the desert, it's not like that. A khejri tree is this mighty desert tree with roots that go down 90 meters, which is, 230 feet or something. And it grows slowly, it grows thick, it sustains the people through giving shade, of course, which is vital. So the trees themselves are spaced apart with the land worked in between. It gives fodder for people, it gives fodder for animals. It's a precious tree. And the Bishnoi, we'll learn something more about them, but they have 29 rules. Their religion is one religion that has nature conservation at its very core. One of their rules, well, two of their rules are important for this. One is don't steal. The other is don't cut from any living tree. In 1730, the Maharaja sent some men out from Jodhpur because he was building a palace. To build the palace, he needed lime. And for that, he needed fire. And for the fire, he needed trees. So they came with their axes to chop down the khejri trees in this desert. The people in this village, now called Khejri, were away. The men were away in the fields. A woman was left, Amrita Devi. She came running out to stop these men chopping down trees. they tried to bribe her because bribing is the equivalent of stealing. She said, no, I will not take your bribe. Then they said, we're going to chop down the tree. She hugged a tree and she said, my head for a tree, it's a cheap price to pay. So the men chopped off her head. Her 3 daughters then came running in. Each held onto a tree, said, my head for a tree is a cheap price to pay. Each were beheaded. And then Bishnoi came back from the fields. They heard about this massacre. They came from many surrounding villages. They all sent their people in to protect the trees. They all held on to trees. They were all beheaded until 363 martyrs for these trees. The Maharaja heard about it and stopped the massacre and said, from henceforth, we will protect the trees on Bishnoi land and also the animals on Bishnoi land. So that's a founding story of tree hugging. There are a couple of examples from before that of individuals protecting trees, but this is that mass protection of trees by the Bishnoi. And that's really, when I heard that story, it amazed me. I knew that, no, I probably would give my life to save a child, and I believed I would do it to save a blue whale, but I didn't know I would do it for a tree. So I wanted to go and meet these people.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. And for some reason, maybe living in the West and judging myself, I just think it seems like a fairy tale where parents tell their kids to inflict some sort of ethics on them or some sort of fable or moral compass, and it is actually, and it seems sort of fantastical that someone or some men could kill, 300 some odd folks with axes. But yeah, we know massacres happen almost all the time, we'll say.
Yeah.
During colonization and all you've actually gone to the source, and it sounds like a real story. And to a certain extent too, using that name tree hugger now, I don't know, I've got some, not say guilt, what's that word? Imposter syndrome, I guess. I was like, yeah, what would I get? Yeah, that's sort of what you said. You would give your life for a child, but what would I give my life for is a good sort of question, I guess, we're posing today. Yeah, it's a really deep, very existential question.
Hooray for you, though, for keeping that tree hugger word in your podcast. We have Keir Starmer, who's purportedly Prime Minister in Britain that's supporting the environment, who disparages tree huggers, because I don't like tree huggers. It's one of these dismissive terms now. So I think it's important to actually keep claiming it.
Yeah, and I will tell you, you may have caught on to this, but I was going round and round about the name of the podcast for a while, and this might not be important to this show, but yeah, my dad has always, like what I do, and a lot of what ecological restorationists do, it's a little obscure, so it's not easy to pin down or define. And so my dad has always just called me a professional tree hugger, for a few decades or whatever that I've been doing this sort of work. So I was like, okay, that's fitting. Resisted it for a while, but at some point I just softened to it, and I was like, yep, let's take it.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. So what was your first encounter with the Bishnoi like?
It was brisk, and I was picked up from Jodhpur station at 10 o'clock one evening, and then it was a real welter of experiences. I was taken to their homes. First of all, you're being driven by somebody who's the president of something called the Bishnoi Tiger Force, and so I didn't even know that existed, but it was obviously something fierce and powerful and strong. And these Bishnois, they drive fearlessly. They have commanding voices. They're powerful people. I mean, just a simple thing, I go with my 2 bags and I left to carry my own bags. It isn't a soft thing at all. It's a tough thing. But I was taken to homes and farms and funerals and schools and met with wonderful children who gave me their wisdom. I said, look, I'm not coming here to teach you, you teach me. And they immediately went into it and did, including little boys saying, go to Khejri, you must visit, you must know everything about Amrita Devi and the tree huggers, and saying, yeah, I would give my life for a tree. I am just for a family, but trees are for everybody. They were very clear on this, and children know these stories. So that was powerful. And then I found myself taken mysteriously, because I wasn't sharing any language with the person guiding me, to a tent out in the desert. And there was a ceremony going on, a religious ceremony, women in their colorful costumes on one side, men in their white costumes on the other. And I was placed on this dais with this ceremony in Marwari, the local language, in Hindi, going on. And I wandered off to the side a little bit after the hours passed, and then was called back because I heard somebody go to the microphone and were electrifying the audience. And I heard my name, Professor Goodman. I heard the word kitab, which I knew was book. And then this patrician, this elderly man who was a member of the local assembly, stood and gave me my commission in English to, you are being commanded to write the story of the Bishnois for the world because the world needs it now. And I had to do my namaste on stage with the people there and accept this commission. So he also then said I must go in the footsteps of Jamboji, their founding guru, which is maybe where we go to next in the origin story of the Bishnoi, Michael.
Yeah, let's hear more about the guru, because I think you alluded to it early. So I have that tether when you said Amrita Devi said something about not accepting a bribe, which is, I think, is one of the principles that 29 principles that they live by. So like, where did all those principles come from, and kind of how were those created?
He came from this man, Jamboji, also called Jambeshwa, Guru Jamboji, who was from the sort of 15th and 16th century, spanning those two. He was born to quite a fairly wealthy family in the village of Pipasar out in the desert, who were farmers. And I tell the miraculous story of his birth in the book and some of those miracle stories that surround him. He was seen, and is now seen by his followers, as being one of these incarnations of Vishnu that include Krishna, include the Buddha. And for me, he is one of those divine beings that have walked our planet and taught us how to live. At 32, his parents died. He decided he didn't want to be a landowner, so went and walked up a sand dune. It seems surprising to walk up a sand dune, but some sand dunes there are solidified with trees growing on them. And this is one of those called Samratel. And he went up there and sat under a tree. For him, a tree is his temple. He doesn't actually want buildings. A tree is my temple. So he was sitting under that tree, and when he gained access to his great god Vishnu, who downloaded these rules to give to his people about how to live in harmony with the planet. That was especially important because this was a time of extreme, long, mega drought in the region and in fact all over the earth. And the people were chopping down trees and killing animals and doing anything they could to survive and fleeing the land. And so these rules were ones that taught people how to live in harmony with the world. He went then around teaching for another 50 or so years, and there are 120 passages of his teachings that are around. But his teachings were also distilled into 29 rules. And a third of these are specifically about nature conservation. A third of them are how to behave well with each other, not set yourself apart from people as well as not apart from nature. And then another third are how to do religious practices. And the 29 in the local language of Marwari is Bishnoi. So the word Bishnoi means these 29 rules.
All right. Yeah, and they are incredible. They're principled, and we'll probably put a link to them in the show notes somewhere. They're in the appendices of your book as well, which I actually really appreciated your explanation for some of them, and they are fairly simple. I did it this morning. I just jumped out of the shower, washing. Washing first thing in the morning. It's not something sometimes I don't do it. Yeah,
it's really curious. There's a story.
Oh, is there?
I think. I told in the book that there was this pretender, this occult guy on a hill nearby a village where Jamboji was. And to catch him out, Jamboji said, which should you do first in the morning, eat or have a shower? And the man said, eat. So he went and dragged him by the hair all off the mountain and all the way into the village until he saw better of things and then accepted the truth of the Bishnois and became a Bishnoi. But it's a very important rule. It's a strange one.
And what draws you personally to their story? It sounds like you just lived with them in contemporary times for like a few weeks or months and got to share some time with them. But I guess what enticed you?
I was out in Jaipur for a literary festival. I was presenting the previous book called Client Earth, the one about eco-lawyers saving the planet. It seemed a long way to go with air miles for taking an environmental book. So I wanted to go and find another story if I could. I was thinking about writing about people that are saving habitats for birds. And so that took me to the story of the great Indian bustard, one of the world's largest flying birds, that only 115 of them were left. And it turned out to be a young Bishnoi that was doing a lot of the work to save them out of the desert. So that sort of attracted me into this world. But I've always been somebody sort of open to spirituality. I've made, 10 trips to India, and a lot of those have been spiritual quests. I wrote a book about an Indian holy woman once. I've written a book about journeying around sacred mountains of the world. My notion of going to a sacred mountain was to use myself as litmus paper. I would go into the mountain and follow the local traditions of revering the mountain and see if I was changed as a result. I've always opened myself to that. And so this was just meeting people that went beyond anything I knew of. I didn't know any religion that had nature as its core. And I didn't like any religions that I found. I didn't particularly adhere to after a while. So that was part of the reason. I'm a natural quester.
Natural quester. All right. I like that. You talked to this, I think, and so definitely the Bishnoi have a past, like centuries long, but they just don't exist in the past. You live with them in the present, I think, and obviously I think we want them to have a future. I guess, how did the Bishnoi understand their role in the ecosystem then?
I don't know if you even think of it as that. They are people that are sort of modeling how we live, but they're not doing it as a model. They're doing it because that's the way one lives, and almost incomprehension that others don't live that way. And the rules are a good guidance. They have these 2 meetings a year in Mukam, the main temple where Jamboji is buried, where about 400,000 Bishnois at a time turn up. And they're reinforced in their beliefs in that way, and they're checked up on as to whether they're able to, abide by these rules and the difficulties they have and things like that. So there's this check-in period for Bishnoi. So I suppose they're looking at how they're managing the world in that way. And they don't believe that just by sitting and praying they can save the world. It has to be action. They have to be doing things. And there was a book launch in Jaipur in February for this book. I invited a Bishnoi on the stage with me. And it was powerful. The whole book event became like a rally for nature and a rally for trees, but also demanding people to take action with them because they cannot do it on their own. So they actually see themselves as preparing the leaders for a third world war, which will be fought on environmental grounds. So they're getting the people with the right values to lead us in that field. But they know everybody else needs to really kick in now because we're all destroying the planet. We're all separated from it. We don't understand the need to take care of the planet in the same way we might take care of our own interests, because that is our interest. But we don't see it. We're blind to it.
Yeah, I was really fascinated by the stories because I honestly just assuming opening the book, cracking the book, I thought it was all going to be about trees. I'm very like tree centric. And so how do you see they widen their circle of care? How do we do that to include beings we may never see, never name, but still impact? There's like multiple stories about how they're, I would say very, action oriented. And I would say, let's say confrontational when they come up again, when there are other animals or their ecosystem is challenged, right? They fight back.
Yeah, they do. I think a forest is not just trees. Forests are all of the creatures that live in the trees, around the trees, under the ground. And we all, the whole of life shares that habitat, and trees give into that. So they did a lot of work on saving animals from poaching. And some of these animals that they save, like the black buck, which is an astounding antelope with these 2 horns that spiral up for 3 feet above their heads, and then small chinkara, which are tiny gazelles. When you go to their villages, each village will have a reserve called an oran, which is like a wildlife reserve where it's land set aside for these animals. And the animals know that they're safe there, they're not going to be killed. So that you see these rare animals clustered around these Bishnoi villages. So they did a lot of famous work going against poachers, taking on this world-famous actor Salman Khan for 20 years through the courts. And this is villagers taking on the mightiest film industry in the world and winning and getting Salman Khan arrested. And that actually did a great deal to stop poaching. So now the Bishnoi Tiger Force, these fierce men, are really working for trees. I was going to my meeting with the Bishnoi Tiger Force at a time of great floods. So we were driving a new ring road being built around Jodhpur, and then the ring road suddenly stopped. I thought, what's happened? This wonderful ring road, and it stopped. And we finally made it to the thing. And I asked them, what happened to that ring road? I said, well, we stopped it. Why? Because they hadn't worked out how to arrange the ring road around trees. They were just cutting down trees indiscriminately. And there was no need. You could actually pattern the road you could have a road and trees. I said, well, how did you do that? Well, 5 of us went and we sat down in this little roadside tent by the construction and we asked them to stop. I said, and that did it? I said, yeah. They said, yes. I said, well, how could that do it? They said, well, they knew that we're Bishnois. So if 5 Bishnois say, stop and we don't stop, then there will be 10, then there will be 100, then there will be 1,000, and then there will be 10,000. There are these Bishnois just alert to be activated. And there's another separate story. There's a battle going at the moment. I was there sort of close to the beginning of it back in 2022 when I was taken to this field. There's many different versions of desert. One is like a Martian landscape, and this looked like that now. But in fact, just months before, it had been filled with these magnificent khejri trees because the energy company wanted to plant some solar panels there. It's very easy if you can just install your solar panels in a row. You don't need to. You can actually arrange the panels around trees. It's been done elsewhere. But they didn't want to do that. So they illegally chopped down the trees and buried all the trees as evidence. And then the Bishnois came along and they dug up these trees. And that was when I realized that in the right context, suddenly I could love a tree enough to give my head for it, because you're in the trenches with these trees that are dismembered trees. It's being in a world war. And the trees are still sort of weeping sap. And villagers had come up from all the villages, like with the martyrs protecting the trees, but because the trees are already gone, they just lay on the ground and hug the earth. I thought that was their demonstration. I thought that was powerful. And it's ongoing now. It's probably in its like 300th day. Bishnoi is protesting at the moment against another installation of solar panels that isn't working to consider the trees. But when I was there as well, we saw this fox go by, and this magnificent local fox. And the man with me was bewailing it. Where is its home now? Where is its habitat? So that's how the wildlife and the trees go together. It's all one. We all share this realm. So we have to protect the animals, but we have to protect the trees. There's no one or the other.
You used the word powerful earlier, and I did have this question about how power shows up in the story, because from what I know, they are very ardent defenders, like how you just talked about, but not in the way that we might think with using like weapons, like knives and swords and guns, like they're nonviolent.
Well, they are, yeah, but the guy that was showing me through those, the desert where the trees had been chopped down and buried. I said, so do you take inspiration from Amrita Devi and tree hugging? He said, no, I don't. I said, I'm not a tree hugger, I'm a fighter. And he went into a fight posture. But they don't arm themselves. They take on armed people with their fists. And I wouldn't want to be caught by them. You'd be battered. You'd survive the battering, but you would be battered. And they would keep going at you until you'd pledged to live a better life.
Yeah, and
I like that about them. They're not just passive warriors at all. They're fierce, and they have these lion's voices, some of them.
Yeah, and I don't want to give too much away from the book, but yeah, there's these stories about them chasing poachers through the night, like chasing an SUV, like double stacked on a motorbike, through the desert, chasing someone, or actually like being killed, like getting shot by a shotgun, like chasing someone, tackling them and getting shot and dying. And so not only are there the martyrs from, hundreds of years ago, there's a current list of, maybe a growing list of martyrs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's ongoing every year. And they are relentless. And I think it is how far will you go to protect your young child? So, well, I go this far, but no further. But that's obviously crazy, because it's your young child. And if you love it, you go to the ends of everything to save that child. If it got killed, you'd work to bring justice. And for them, tree, child, it's the same. And the tree can give them everything, but it can't protect, or the little gazelle can give them everything, but it can't protect itself from a poacher, but people can, So they have that power to do it. And so that's what they do.
Honestly, it's because I'm like, maybe because I'm a dude or whatever. I just like these stories of, fighting for what you love in your family or
Yeah,
whatever. But there's also this tender side of their life too, where these endangered animals they live amongst them. They are like welcome, or they're actually not scared when they see people pass
absolutely.
by. So we often think in Western conservation that we need to like separate everything, throw up big
Mm,
fences like the fortress conservation, throw up big fences and surround the mountain, keep people, low density out of the mountain or off the mountains, let's say, or
yeah.
out of the wilderness. But this is, I feel like, a little bit different twist, a very people centered, like life affirming twist on conservation, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. One of the stories about the women is they do breastfeed orphaned chinkara, the little gazelles, and there's a picture in the book of the woman's baby at one breast and a chinkara at the other, and that's part of that nurturing and giving to these creatures. And if you go into any temple, you'll find some wounded animals inside the temple being restored, and so that nature is inside every temple and outside as well. I mean, I went to one, and there were hundreds and hundreds of demoiselle cranes that fly in from Mongolia and other lakes. So they fly these huge journeys to overwinter, and they're fed grain by the local priest, which is provided by the local community. They take care of everything that they see. And that was an interesting thing for me about the Bishnois. One of the young Bishnois said, "What do you think about Greta?" I said, "No, Greta Thunberg, she is always angry." And I said, "Well, isn't that sometimes appropriate?" She said, "No, anger is never right. What you should do instead is do something. You just got to do action in the world," which I interpret really as you can always find, you can actually destroy yourself with anger and upset. I think that can be happening at the moment in the situation we're left in, or you can get just so upset about it that you're paralyzed. But if you actually look out of yourselves and see something that you could take care of, and then you take care of it, you feel better. And that actually shows to me that what the Bishnoi's practice in that we're all one is true, because if you take care of something, you feel better. So that thing then is you, because there's no separation. I found in London, this is a tiny little thing, and it's nothing like what you do with all your planting, Michael, but the local council has planted trees in the streets. And then the trees in the summer often some of them fade and some of them die. So you could be walking along the streets, and if you notice the trees, you could be upset by this, or you could be angry with the council for not following through with regular water or something. But instead, I just take a watering can, and I just go and water the trees when it's hot. But what happens is then neighbors come out of their own hours and say, "Oh, well, thanks very much. That's really good. We'll take over." So we suddenly got a community of people watering the trees. It's a small thing, but you just feel good about it, and then you're in community. Yeah. And I find that's a kind of a minimal thing, a Bishnoi type thing to do, but it's just seeing a way of caring and then caring. One of the other things that really strikes me about these people, I met this 80-year-old man who was just a basic laborer, and had a small farm holding, and he would work in the winters when he couldn't be planting trees to earn enough money for his family, working as a plasterer on remote sites. And then through 60 years, he's planted hundreds of thousands of trees throughout the dunes. And it's astounding. And I met this young teacher, and she's trained to be a teacher, and she's running an animal rescue center 24/7. I kept meeting all of these people who kept going beyond. And I know myself, I'd say, "Yeah, that's really good that you do that. I'd love to do that too, but I'm actually really very busy." No, I'd like to do that. When I'm not so busy, I'd like to do it. But they don't have that concept. If there's something to do, they'll do it. They can't be too busy to care. And care is action. Care is doing something. That's the Bishnoi message in the world. I mean, you could also go through the things and go through vegetarianism and don't kill animals, let all animals lead their full natural lives. There are these other rules in there that we can all work towards applying, or we can pick one. But caring is action.
Caring is action. That is great. I also think that's balanced out by meditation, the spiritual,
Yeah.
quiet practice, because sometimes
Yeah.
we're moving so fast or just responding in this very sympathetic nervous system, I guess, and that we always do have to, I think, to have a sustainable life or resilient, gritty life is to actually balance that with a regulated nervous system and seeing awe the great things around us, or taking time to be quiet and get good sleep, I guess. But then, so there's that. So I don't want to be like, yo, we always got to be moving around doing things. But the other thing you said, honestly, great takeaway for all listeners out there, watering trees. Can't be just planting trees. That's like very simple. That's like straight up urban forestry 101. I'm glad you snuck that in. Yeah, because obviously the state or the city doesn't always follow up, and there's not always the resources to do the maintenance, which makes the world go round. So if trees can't really take care of us if we don't take care of them. So just water, yeah, even if it's during a mega drought in the desert, or if it's in an urban heat island in your neighborhood, yeah, watering trees, just taking a little time to give that love. Because trees, yeah, they just need light, a little bit of space, and some water.
Yeah, and then they give you everything.
Yeah. And then we're good. Nice. Lovely. I do have this question. Do you see any parallels between the Bishnoi story and other indigenous or colonized communities around the world or during your travels that you've seen?
Yeah, I wish I could be more authoritative on that. And I mean, to research this book, I went looking into how the indigenous communities of California treated their land. And for them, it isn't just a wilderness. It's land that they work. Agriculture is part of it all. The Aborigines were the same. They actually worked their land. And there's that pattern of living harmoniously on the land, reaping from it and giving back to it all the time, but not just having a wilderness that was like over there. So they recognize that humans are a part of that natural landscape, and then know how to manage that in a refined and sensitive way. So there is that. And others, I think the absolute appalling sense of killing any animal is probably special to the Bishnois. They just will not do anything to kill an animal, and every animal must be let to live out its natural life. I think that's something that is distinctive. I don't know of any other community that does that. And the UK edition had the Bishnois called the world's first eco-warriors. It wasn't allowed in America because it seemed like too much of a stance. Maybe there were earlier eco-warriors. But I don't know that there are other communities that have really fought for earlier ones that have fought so, with their lives to protect trees, and they understand the value of trees, and they understand that if you're hunting, you can't kill out all the animals, you have to kill a few, though obviously some indigenous peoples have killed all the animals. And so I think for me, it's a purer, more refined vision. It comes from a more recent time as well. I was interested to looking at parallels, realizing that Guru Jamboji, that sounds like this sort of fabulous, mystical, faraway guy, was living at the same time as Martin Luther. And that's quite accessible. And the Bishnois now talk of him as being an environmental scientist, the first environmental scientist. But that there wasn't the ability to talk to his people through the medium of science, so he distilled that and passed it on through the medium of religion. And I think it is one of those messages that is fairly recent, really. It came in a mega drought, and speaking to a world now that is suffering desertification and all of the extremes of climate change. And its message couldn't be more vital now. This is the time when the world is destroying itself, and we need to learn to live in harmony. So I find it, in a way, more modern than other indigenous communities, because it actually stems from a more recent episode.
Yeah, I think only Western science only goes so far. And there is a principle in ecological restoration too. I feel like it's pretty important, is just to like embrace or acknowledge or collaborate with like local knowledge as well as like indigenous knowledge systems. So I think many of us, I bet a lot of us listening are just trained in Western science, but a sort of just a collaboration with local folks as well as, or following their lead, essentially, right? I think is very important for conservation or restoration moving forward.
The parallel that I've been finding sort of most close to the Bishnois, curiously, is what's happening in China now. And I've learned this through my husband, James, really, who works a lot with the Chinese. But they have this concept called ecological civilization. And they say, no, there was a Stone Age, there was agricultural age, there was the industrial civilization. And now we need an ecological civilization. In the last decades, they did a lot to bring their people out of poverty. But they realized that the effects of that were to destroy the habitat and destroy what sustains everybody. So they're working, and that's actually part of their constitution now, to bring about ecological civilization. So you reframe, finance, business, law, and religion to make sure that we're living in harmony with the planet and we all survive. The way I link that in with the Bishnoi is that Chinese can go back 2,000 years of looking after their people, and they speak about we've got to take care of this planet so that our people in 2,000 years can enjoy it. And that's what the Bishnois have done. For 500 years, they've been having this same message. They're outside of our absurd election cycles that we have in the West, where everybody has their urgent demand for, for silly things and the total lies, and then people get elected and then start again. All the money goes into that re-election and that quick chasing of power. But instead, okay, well, what do people and our land need? And so that for me is the most hopeful parallel. Are the Bishnois doing it? Well, they're telling us through this book in the West how to do it, give it a go. China is taking a lead now where America is willfully stepping back. And I think there's hope there in terms of moving beyond these short-term points into bigger points. Vast reforestation programs that you probably know more of than I do in China, Michael.
Yeah, we did a China episode years ago with one of my former professors who's like a China expert. So yeah, there's this idea of American exceptionalism where we think we do everything better and we exported conservation around the world. But yeah, it's always good to look around for the best examples, even if they weren't our ideas.
Yes.
So I love this conversation because the book is one thing. I think we want to encourage people to read the book. However, it's just, a couple hundred pages, and I'm sure some things were left on the digital cutting room floor, I guess. Are there any ways, anything you can think about that didn't make it in the book that you want to talk about?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Michael. The publishers really wanted a book about trees, and it sold that. And Peter Volleben, who wrote The Hidden Life of Trees, wrote the introduction for it, which was powerful. And that's how it's being pushed into the world. I kept saying, well, isn't it also interesting that this is, the world religion that's been that has nature conservation at its core? And they say, no, not really. And I say, isn't it interesting that this man who is the equivalent of, Muhammad and Jesus and the Buddha isn't known about in the West, but he's got these teachings that we need now? And they say, well, yeah, kind of maybe. So some of those visits to temples and things like that are what really affected me. And they came onto the website so I put them onto my website, martingoodman.com.
Excellent. Does some of those stories show up in your Substack as well, or no? Are those different?
Yeah, that's right. Thanks for mentioning that. That one's sort of running live. It's called Letters from Home. And yeah, it's been a big journey, the 5 years of from meeting them to delivering the book. And then recognizing how the Bishnoi's teachings are permeating my own life and my own actions, and how they respond to the crises we find ourselves in. And there was kind of a steady people that have been just living in the heart of the natural world and supportive of it for 500 years. So just going back to that as your template sometimes is useful. And that will be reflected in my Substack going forward.
Yeah, we'll put those links in the show notes so everyone can find. I just feel like it's a great compliment. Well, it's not. I guess it's a compliment to the book because we're talking about the book now. But yeah, it's really something that kind of lives digitally. That's a little bit more of a some of the living story beyond what lives perpetually in the bounds of the book. So that's cool. And so the book's been out for a bit, just like a little short while now. Where can people find the book?
Hopefully, any good bookstore near you, or bookshop.org or Amazon. It's available now. It came out in Britain in end of January, and India too, and then North America in April, and it just should be available everywhere now. So yeah, just go find it.
Excellent.
It looks beautiful. It's got wonderful photographs largely by the photographer Frank Vogel. Some of mine and some of other people, but lots of single-page ones and then double-page spreads of photos. So there's a separate journey that takes you into the Bishnoi world, a narrative of photographs that complements the narrative of the text.
Yeah, I love that as well. I was pleasantly surprised to see the images, and it really kind of helped bring things to life, honestly. Yeah, the words only.
Yeah,
Because you think desert, or you talk about all these animals, you really don't know what they look like, and the people too,
yeah.
and like the way they're dressed, and it shows some of their culture. So yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and seeing all the women sitting under a khejri tree, you understand what a khejri tree is a lot more.
For sure. All right, if you're ready, I think we're kind of winding down, but still, I wanted to this is a little short tradition on Tree Hugger Podcast to do some rapid fire, short answer, personal reflection questions. You ready for that?
Okay. Yeah, it's a good plan. Keeps people listening to the end.
Seriously, it's some fun stuff here. In one word, could you finish this expression? Restoration is.
Right. Togetherness.
Nice. That's a new one. I'm glad. That's a great one.
Right.
Have you hugged a tree since writing this book?
Yeah, I have. My hugging trees is actually taking them in my arms and embracing them, but I put one hand or two hands on them just to feel the effects of the bark and imaginatively at least connect to the energy of it all. So yeah, just the other Saturday I was up on a book tour that took me into Oakland and went into second growth redwood forest there, and put my hand on the sponge bark of the tree for a while and was happy.
Yeah, I like that one too. Some trees honestly are too big to hug, right? So it's like a half hug, right?
Yeah, that's
so you
right.
need to be able to, just put that energy out there through your hand. Yeah, I think just that hand for a few seconds or minutes can really be powerful. Is there any like a sound or smell or moment from the desert that still lingers with you?
Sound, smell, moment. It's a visual moment. Can work. That one comes up. There's a trail of dust in the desert. The Thar desert becomes like true kind of Martian desert with shrubs and things as you get nearer to the Pakistan border. And we were there looking for great Indian bustards. And so the bustards are these sort of really large birds, one of the largest birds you can be without and still be able to take off. And they have eyes in the side of their head, so they're peering left and right all the time, but scanning the horizon. But one of the things they like to check for is the trail of dust from a chinkara. Chinkara, those tiny little gazelles that will leap off at alarm if there's anything that disturbs them. And our coming to the desert in this jeep had disturbed this chinkara. So we've been watching the distant line, like galleons of bustards walking through the desert, their long necks pecking stuff from the ground. But then they spotted the dust of this chinkara, and that's an alarm signal for them. So suddenly they were padding into a running movement as well, because they knew there was something there to alarm. So I like that interconnection of species through this trail of dust.
That's great. It's so cool to learn about these different ecosystems and the different little tendencies, I guess they have, the expressions of what they have. Because I see like when we see, I don't really see swirls of dust because I live in this mossy, kind of moldy place in the Pacific Northwest. It's mostly just rain a lot of the time. So thinking about, I can imagine dust storms. That's cool.
Yeah, and I also saw this herd of nilgai, who are these sort of large antelopes that also live in that part of the desert. And they were I was going out with scientists in an early morning hunt of the great Indian bustards because they were there protecting them. And this alarmed the nilgai. So suddenly they thundered off towards the sunset with clouds of dust going up from their hooves. So that was also good. Yeah. So a couple of big dust memories.
Dust memories. Is there a sound from nature that makes you pause every time?
A sound from nature. I mean, birdsong always does it. We've got a little place tucked into the Pyrenees in France where we've been going regularly now for 30 odd years, and last April it was just filled again with the song of nightingales. So there's nothing sweeter than that, though I do like being alerted through my Merlin app to distinguish any bird sounds at the moment as well. So me and Merlin go out into any walk, even around here in Santa Monica, and you could hear 10 birds, and you distinguish the little sounds. You could then look up and know what that bird is.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool how I guess the AI recognizes birds' sounds. Yeah, it's sweet. I hear birds. Like, I am kind of a tree guy, vegetation guy, and so I'm pretty ignorant about birds, but it's a good way to learn, huh?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Are there any stories or principles you pass down to your friends and family about what you love and how to protect it?
Not immediately, I don't think. I mean, I asked them to read this book. I mean, I suppose the things I am saying to people at the moment that are really disturbed about the way things are going on is a distillation of the Bishnoi message, which is maybe useful for the West. And it's when you find yourself consumed, or not consumed so much, but almost paralyzed by anxiety or fired up by anger, and that's your principal thing, still all of that, and then look around you and see if there's anything that you can care for. And then don't just notice something to care for, but actually go out there and care for it, even if it's like talking to the lonely old lady or watering that street tree, and that really can be effective. That can be something of a cure for that. I think it also shows the integration of yourself and nature, because if you find that you've gone out there and watered that street tree so that it's actually looking better than not, or helped somebody up a staircase carrying a toddler carriage, you feel better afterwards. And it's so if you help something else, it's proof that you're also helping yourself. And so that's probably something I do keep saying to people.
That's great. Yeah, super simple. I do feel like, watering a tree, helping it grow, helping someone else. That's a good way to show love and care.
Yeah, and it's just taking action rather than just being paralyzed with fear or anger or anxiety.
Excellent. All right. Well, I've been building this mixtape for a few months now. So I call it's the Tree Hugger Lightning Round playlist. So I was wondering if you had any song that kind of resonates with the story of the Bishnoi, or any other great song you'd want to add to that playlist.
I have, and it's gonna thrill everybody. It's just the most wonderful song. It's Nina Simone, and it's called "Feeling Good." And it's her being completely at one with nature, at least aspiring to that, and including, feeling as good as the blossoms on the tree and the birds in the air, and this whole natural world. It's being a part of that. So whenever you're down, I think probably 5 times a day, go through Michael's playlist, and then once you've heard everything else, listen to this one, "Feeling Good."
Man,
Nina Simone.
Playlist is coming together. I would have never thought of Nina Simone. That's great. Thank you so much. All right, we'll put that one in there, and the link to it will be in the show notes. All right, Martin. Well, I appreciate your time. I really, very much grateful for you writing this book and bringing this story to the world. I enjoyed it, and I hope other folks get to read it as well.
Thanks, Michael. It's a great honor and privilege and treat to be part of your tree hugger community. And thanks to everybody who cares so much that they're listening and being part of this community. I really appreciate it, and all the love and care and work you put into it.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of today's conversation. I hope this episode leaves you as stirred as it left me, not just by the extraordinary acts of devotion we heard about, but by the quiet daily ways the Bishnoi continue to weave love into the fabric of the living world. Because maybe devotion isn't always standing in front of an axeman. Maybe it's refilling the bird baths. Maybe it's letting the tree on your street corner grow crooked without filing a complaint to the city. Maybe it's choosing to stay tender when the world feels too sharp. Through the Bishnoi story, we remember that love isn't only grand sacrifice, it's also steady, patient care. It's giving your attention, your hands, your breath, and sometimes your slightly questionable backyard tree pruning skills to life itself. If you found something meaningful in today's episode, I'd be grateful if you shared it with someone you care for, or even someone you argue with about whether trees have feelings or not. Word of mouth is still the oldest, most human way we spread stories that matter. And if you want to keep weaving these conversations into your own life, I invite you to subscribe to Grit and Grove on Substack, where I share reflections, slow dispatches from the field, and glimpses into what it means to live in relationship with the land and with each other. You can find the link in the show notes. Thank you for being part of this growing, breathing community. Until next time, keep tending, keep loving, and maybe find a tree worth hugging, even if it's just metaphorically or, literally. No judgment here. See you soon. See you in the woods.